Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Crossover Deep Dive podcast. Today, I am thrilled to have Jason Tonioli with me. Hi, Jason.
How's it going? Glad to be here.
Thank you for being here. You did this spiritual album that's one of my favorites. We're going to talk about it later, but I have that on my personal playlist. I love that album so much. But I want to start your biography when, the story of how everyone starts. It was a little bit different because you referred to something as the piano war, I believe. So you had an interesting start. Tell us about that.
Well, I think I'm like most musicians, essentially. That when you're young, you start playing piano, and your mom, you think, oh, that's going to be really fun. But after you realize you have to start practicing and you have to work at it, most kids probably aren't super excited about that. And I just jokingly refer to that experience as the piano war with my mother, and luckily she won that. And I, when all my friends would be out playing, in the street on their bikes or playing football, basketball outside, I'd have to get my piano practicing done. And I thought that was, terrible and I know I'm not the only one that was probably like that. I mean, there's a few, I'm jealous of those few people out there that just love to sit at the piano and practice all day long. But I think the reality is for most people, that's not the case. Right. So.
And I think that's when we lose. I taught music just for a little bit, but that's when sometimes when you lose it is kids are like, oh, this is really fun for the first 5 lessons or 10 lessons. Yep. And then it gets a little bit harder and it's like, all right, well, I'm ready to do something else now. But I think that's actually really good to have that start where you realize, okay, now this is something I have to dedicate time to. And
well, and I think in looking back, backwards, I wish I'd been more mature as a teenager. And realized, wow, if I practice, I'm going to get better. And it was really a fight all the way up through my sophomore year. Finally, at the end of my sophomore year of high school, I was allowed to quit the piano. I went a whole year really without, just kind of to show my mom, I don't want to play this. And so I barely touched the piano for my entire junior year, but I was starting to write music. And I think one of my frustrations was, and I know this happens to a lot of people, is, you're playing these classical songs, your Beethovens, and, I was even getting up into the Rachmaninoff type of, crazy piano stuff. And it's great, but I wanted to play it the way I wanted to play it. And I think that was get me in trouble at lessons because I'd change up Beethoven or rock, even a little bit of the Rachmaninoff. And that I'm the one that I felt like I was the one that was playing it. So I should be able to play it the way I felt at the moment, or felt like it should be played. And just jokingly, my teacher would say, well, these dead composers are going to come back and haunt you if you change the way the music's written, and I think for many of us, I've never been haunted by a composer. And frankly, I think if Beethoven could come and sit in the room with somebody, I think if he were playing that song, he'd play it different every time. And so as much as he wrote it out that way, I'm kind of not in agreement with it has to be exactly this is the proper way to do it, because I think it changes based on how you're feeling and the mood, and maybe even the mood of the audience. If you are one of those really great classical pianists playing with an orchestra, you can change how the music feels so much. And that's what makes music beautiful, in my opinion, is just having it be this living thing that you're part of.
Yeah, there's that sort of like historical style of performing, right? It's like, these are the notes we found, we must do them exactly like that. But as you mentioned, on the vocal side, you'd hear that they would rewrite based on the singer, right? They'd give them a new cadenza based on that range. Yep. So it was definitely a lot more interactive. But what was that experience for you? So you mentioned like, you didn't really want to do it. Is that why you started composing? You were like, okay, I'm just going to make my own music then.
And what I've been told by my piano teachers, you can, for piano lessons, you need to play what's written. And until you start writing your own music, you need to play what's written. And
okay, she planted the seed.
An honorary teenager, I'm like, well, fine, I'll go write my own music then. And so I started doing that. And I think there was a thing called the Reflections Contest I think it's a nationwide thing, but there was basically a competition at the school where you could write a song, and there was a whole bunch of other creative endeavors as well, but music was one of the categories, and you could win $50 if you wrote a song and won. And so starting in junior high, I actually started writing some songs, and I won $50 and $100 a couple times over the years with it, which was fun. And I think that was probably what motivated me, at least right at first, to do the music, because $50 was a lot of money back then, to me at least.
What was those early compositions like?
They were simple. They were just, I mean, just your normal 1 4 5 chords, and you know, I've always heard music in my head. I hear music all the time, and what I've learned is, where that comes from. I mean, if people have their own opinions, whether you think it comes from God or other places. I think there's music all around us and a soundtrack going on, and a handful of us are able to kind of tap into that, and but very few of us take the time to actually write it out. You know, a lot of people whistle or sing songs or hum songs, but very few of us will actually sit on the piano and go through the pain of mapping out what that song is, and then actually going to all the effort to put it into sheet music, and that somebody could actually play. And I think as I've gone to that effort of writing it out, like clear back into junior high, when it was painful. I had to, like, every single note was written on paper manuscript. And that's how I did it for years until the iPad came along with the pencil. And that's kind of how I do it more, but I'll still whistle songs into my phone when I'm hiking or walking. And, I mean, I have songs hit me in the shower sometimes, and first thing I do when I get out is, I'll sing the song in so I don't forget it, and then I'll go sit at the piano to write those in. But I think a lot of people don't ever do anything with those ideas as they have them, and I think the more you do start to show, hey, I'm going to do something with this great idea or this music, you get more, and it starts to get a little bit easier and a little bit easier. But it takes time. It definitely is not an easy process.
Yeah, that's something I noticed from you is, you're not only releasing these albums, but you're also sharing the sheet music for all these arrangements you've done. And I do think that's something a little bit unique because we get so many albums, but not necessarily the sheet music for that arrangement that you'd love to have. So what is that process like, Jason? Because obviously if you're doing a cover, it's also licensing. There's a lot of things that go into it.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of effort. I think, like I said, most people don't ever want to even go to the effort to put one song down. And it really started, if I rewind the clock back 20 plus years, I just wanted to share a couple of my songs with people. And I've done 20 books now, which is crazy to think there's that many. But when I started, I literally had about 7 or 8 songs, and I wanted to share them with friends and family. And I thought, yeah, maybe it'd be easier to put them in a book than like print out and do sheet protectors, and have kind of a binder. My very first book I did was actually a binder that I took to my now wife, Stacy, and they were songs that I'd written for her and gave her to her for Valentine's Day. But then, people wanted to play the songs, so I figured out with the printer, okay, if I just need to put them into these PDF files, and then they can print the book, and we want to do like a nice cover. So it's just little step by step. And then that was in the early 2000s. And then the internet was kind of coming along, and I was working at a bank as a marketing director. And my job was literally helping the bank to build their website to do online banking and mortgage type of things like that. And so I was lucky enough at that time to kind of be working in that. And so I used what I learned at the bank and apply those same skills or bring in the right people to build a website. We used to have to code by hand. Like, we had to code this whole thing by hand. It's so much easier now. I mean, you literally can just drag and drop and have a site in a couple days now, if you want something basic. But back then it was, I mean, I was spending $5,000 and $10,000 out of pocket and just reinvesting anything I'd make back into trying to find ways to share it with more people. And I literally reinvested in, for like 20 years, anything I'd make, I'd just put it back in, whether it was going to the recording studio, whether it was, website improvements or software to be able to do that. And my goal was just to share and add value to people and hopefully make their life a little bit better. And, all of a sudden, 20 years later, somebody's like, oh, you're like this overnight success. I'm like, yeah, 20 years is a long overnight. but realistically, that's how it is. I think with most things, you just have to, if you have the right reason you're doing them, it becomes easy. And I think the payday for me was never, oh, I want to make the $1 million. I want to help people. And if I can just help a couple of people along the way, it was worth it,
Now, what stage did you feel comfortable to start like reimagining pieces? Because obviously sacred music has played a big part in your life, but you started doing this and then you played with some legends, which I'm going to ask you about in a second. But when did you start thinking, okay, I've written enough, now I can take these pieces on?
I never really thought I can take these pieces on. It was just more for fun. I'd just do it. And I think like the arrangements of hymns, I've done almost 10 books of hymn arrangements of old classic hymns. And with those, if I'm playing in church, if I'm playing the organ, I mean, frankly, if you played out of a hymn book, they're great, but they could be greater if you just add a few notes to them. And so I just kind of started exploring and adding it. And whether the bishop or the pastor or the church person up there is like, hey, we want you to jazz it up. I didn't even ask them. I just made it my own. What I felt like would be better. And it gave, adding a couple notes in would be all I do probably at first. Then I'd add a few more notes and get a little more confidence. And then next thing I know, I'm, sitting at a piano at home, just thinking, well, what would it sound like if I really wrote a full piano solo rather than just having people sing to it? And, I think there's been some pioneers along the way, that have done a lot of arrangements. I mean, you go backwards. I mean, David Neveu, John Schmidt's one that comes to mind that just was kind of right down the road from me. That I was really fortunate to kind of know him and be helping him back 20 plus years ago before anybody even knew who he was. And whether that's I watched him and kind of gained inspiration and realized, oh my gosh, people do want to have music shared with them, and I can do it similar to what he's done. So.
Yeah, I didn't realize you guys lived that close. That's so close. Cool that you had somebody that was making that path in front of you and making it possible. Talking about the people, so you have performed with Aretha Franklin.
I have not performed with Aretha Franklin, no. So the piano that I have, I know was used. So I have a piano in my studio. She's performed on that piano.
So it's the shared music strings that have been
right
there.
So we got those vibes. I know the piano that I'd had in the studio up until just a couple months ago, U2, Jason Mraz was on that list. I mean, it was incredible, the people who'd actually played on that piano that I had.
Amazing.
And so that, it's one of those, I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of amazing people. John Schmidt from the Piano Guys is probably one of the more well-known kind of crossover type of artists that has just done amazing things. I've worked with his same producer that he worked with for years. So that's who's helped me and kind of made my music sound much better than I could have ever done on my own.
So let's talk about this hymn album that you did. So I've been a big fan of Celtic women for forever. Okay. So continued to follow those ladies, and you did, they had this group, Alex Sharp and Lynn Hillary. Yep. And I don't remember the third, was it Adele Murphy?
So Adele Murphy came out, and there was another gal named Lisa that came out and helped on one of the recording projects we were doing. Yeah.
Okay, so they formed this Cara Nua group, and that's how I discovered you, was through that just gorgeous album. So how did that come about? Because that seems like a dream collaboration.
So that album came about. I'd been recording music with Chuck Myers for years down at his studio, and Chuck's the one that had helped Piano Guys, John Schmidt, and I'd done multiple hymn arrangements and hymn books that I'd published and sold, and then the albums that had been out there. And I got a call out of the blue from a friend of mine just up north, and he said, "Hey, I'm putting on this like St. Patrick's Day concert, and there's this gal named Alex that's going to come out, and she's performing, and she needs somebody to come play piano for her. Would you be willing to come play piano?" And next thing I know, I'm like, "Yeah, that sounds kind of fun." And I said I probably ought to chat with her. And I didn't realize she's from Celtic Woman. I've been a huge Celtic Woman fan for years as well. Next thing I know, we're on a Zoom call. I was expecting it to be like 15 minutes, and I think it was like 2.5 hours long that Alex and I were just chatting and sharing stories and just really hit it off. She's just a gem of a person. So she's amazing. So any of the listeners that aren't familiar with her, you should go check her out for sure. But and the Celtic Woman stuff. But that started as just a concert the two of us did. I had a violinist that Alex had worked with as well that I was introduced to. Found out that he'd been in D.C. and had been gigging there for years. I mean, he actually played for, I think, both Bushes for their inaugural balls for Obama. He literally was playing with Billy Joel on stage for the Obama's first dance on Piano Man. I'm like, who gets to play with Piano Man, right? So I found out he's like 40 minutes north of me. I'm like, what? and I'm in Utah. Like, and so anyway, we basically put this concert together, had a blast doing it, and said, hey, let's do another one. And then I had an opportunity to do a concert where Alex said, hey, I've got this group of girls. We want to come and do some stuff. And one thing led to another. And next thing I know, I'm flying them out here to Utah. We're recording for like 2 weeks at the studio with Chuck Myers, so Chuck was the lead composer on the Hogwarts Legacy Harry Potter video game. So he
Very cool.
was up
Okay.
for a Grammy, I think, a year ago. Just an incredibly talented person, but we were going to go record there, and he's like, yeah, this sounds fun. And we were just going to use a lot of my hymn arrangements that had been for piano. And I'd planned on doing like 2 songs. And the next thing I know, we did like 20 songs in that 2 weeks. It was one of those like moments where just everything was clicking, and Chuck was doing the orchestration for it. And this was like 7-8 years ago, right when we were just in he wasn't even hired as the Harry Potter or the Hogwarts Legacy composer yet. And we were just putting out ideas. We're like, so as that album was happening that you really like, so imagine starting to do a couple of demo tracks to do Harry Potter type music, which was really cool. And
Yeah.
so you'll actually probably hear some of that flavor in that in the album, because we were doing that same stuff at that time. They came back and did several other albums. We did several projects along the way, but yeah, it was just a fun time with really talented musicians. When you put people in the room together like that, really amazing things can happen. And that was one of those special ones for me.
I love that it kind of happened organically, it grew into this larger project. So you kind of mentioned before that you've done all these books on hymns, and you have a lot of albums and singles of hymns. So your most recent one I was listening to today was the Peaceful Hymns, Piano Hymns album.
Okay.
Can you share a little bit about that album and some of your favorites on there?
Oh, the Peaceful Piano Hymns. I'm trying to even think of which ones that is. I think I have 6 or 7 of those albums. Boy,
This is a hard question, I realize, because you've done
Yeah.
a few of the same series, right?
So yeah, I mean, I think I'm approaching like 200 songs, and
Oh, wow. Okay.
it's one of those. If you tell me to pick I think the favorite one is always whatever I'm working on at the moment.
Yeah.
There's been some really special ones along the way. Amazing Grace is one of those that just kind of came together. I'd hesitated to do an arrangement of that tune for a long. I mean, I'd played it lots of times, but it was one of those where it never felt right. That one was that arrangement came together during the week after my dad passed away, and it was kind of one of those. I mean, obviously, if your father passes away, you're gonna have feelings that are like, okay, man, and it just was one of those where the emotions kind of came out and it came together and was really special. Chuck came in and added strings to that. We actually went up and filmed up in the top of the Utah mountains up by the ski resorts. We took $150,000 grand piano with us as well and put it by the side of a river. It was amazing. So fun. That's probably one of the very most special ones, just because so many people came together working on that project to make it just really special. So
What's it like to revisit songs? Because I feel like in your catalog, you've done a couple of them different times, and that maybe is one of my fears as an amateur musician, is like, you're like, oh, I love this piece so much, I want to put the best possible version, but it can really grow with you over time. So I'm curious, when you say, okay, now I want to revisit this piece.
I've got a couple of even the old hymns that I've done a couple of arrangements for, and frankly, they're totally different arrangements. And like, who's the one to tell you that you can't do more than one? I mean, maybe you want to do 10 different versions. Like, if you're, who am I trying to impress? I mean, I'm doing music for me. Like, if you like it, that's great. If you don't, okay, you don't have to listen to it. But I think for any artist, just being scared to do something and kind of put your own flavor on it. Why? Who are you scared of? What is it that's preventing you from? Nobody has like this magic permission slip that they give you that says you can do, you can play something on the piano or the guitar or sing or whatever. It's, I see a lot of artists kind of hesitant to try things. And I think it's a shame. It's really sad to do that. One of the best things I've ever been told, or that I try to repeat to myself, is I watch musicians that start things all the time and they get it like 90-95%, and then they think, oh, it's not good enough, or it's not perfect.
Oh yeah.
You gotta stop stopping. Like, for real, stop stopping. That's probably the thing that slows people down and causes more, believing in yourself is, I've learned in this game. I mean, I've done dozen businesses and grown several of them to several $1 million. And the reality is you have to believe that you can. And artists in general, I feel like they tend to not believe that they're capable, or that they're not good enough, or they're still stuck in this, hey, my voice teacher, or my college teacher told me that I was no good, and I wasn't good enough to do this. And, well, who cares? You're good. Believe that you're good enough, and you can do it. There's nothing stopping you from doing this, other than your own belief system and ability to try and do it.
Oof, that hits home. So do you teach people, Jason, as well?
I do not teach any lessons. I've coached a handful of artists. I launched the Successful Musicians podcast. We've got a mastermind where we bring in, we've got a handful of musicians that we have as part of that group. That one is, intended for people who want to grow. I see a lot of musicians where they just get stuck, and you need to, so I've wanted to put together people that are going to support each other and motivate each other and share the successes and share what their challenges are, and kind of go with that. And so that's been really fun to put that together. But yeah, I mean, I'll coach people. I've mentored people. We've got some things we may be launching with the Successful Musicians brand. But if I do it, honestly, it's just to motivate and help people believe in themselves so they can, just go for it.
So as part of your intro to that podcast, you mentioned being someone that at one point you didn't think you could make a living from music, and now you can. So I wanted to pick your brain a little bit. That obviously you'll have to go listen to the podcast if you want to get more of that, but just a couple high level thoughts if you have them on
making money as a musician.
Yeah.
So I think the single best thing that ever happened to me as a musician was in college. And I had actually published some songs, like with a real publisher, putting some of my sheet music out there. And so I kind of, I thought it was a big deal, high school kid that, I still have the check for $2.50 hanging on my wall that I was paid by the publisher. So never cashed
That's
it.
Cool.
So back then, you couldn't make, like, I joke, it's like, I didn't make any, like, I guess made $2.50. I'm sure the check had bounced now, but that was kind of that start. But I ended up in college, and they told me I wanted to do orchestration and kind of do film scoring. And so you had to go through the music program, and they had like their music 101 and your next level. And then by like the middle of the third year, you could go into orchestration and learn how to do strings and all that. And I was already doing a lot of that already. And so I went to the first day of class, and they required you to take music 101. And I'd passed this AP test, so which was supposed to, clip out of all of that stuff. And I ended up learning about whole notes, half notes, and we started to touch on quarter notes for the day. And there were 50 people in this class, and you had this little beady-eyed professor with glasses up there. And I still have no idea how he took a full hour to get through 3 note types that you could have learned about in first grade in elementary school. And I was so frustrated. I'm like, oh my gosh. And there was like half the people in the room were like, oh my gosh, a quarter note. Wow. And, so I went the next day tried to have the best attitude ever. And I just really wanted to do orchestration. And at the end of class, I think we'd gotten into rests, which, and I think they'd gotten to 8th rests, and I just went up after and I said, hey, I really want to do orchestration. And I know you're the one that teaches that class. I've published stuff. I'm already writing music. How can I get into that class and do that? And he's like, well, you can't do that for 3 years. I'm like, why? I'm already doing it. And then he says, well, you have to go through all these classes. Well, I passed the AP test. Well, that doesn't matter. You have to learn how to do all this first. And I just said, well, I already know how to do this. I'm writing a lot of music. Is there any way maybe I could help you teach about 16th notes tomorrow? Woo, could I just like maybe challenge me a little bit with like 2 or 3 minutes? I'd love to kind of, I'm sure if I helped teach something, maybe I'd learn a little bit more. And he got like all offended, and he's like, no, you can't do this until the third year. And that is not allowed. This is how the program works. If you want to be in the program, then you have to follow what the program says we have to do. And I just had this kind of, screw you moment where I'm like, well, I don't even want to learn from you because frankly, I don't think you get music. Like, I'm sure you're really good at doing the music stuff, but I don't think you're the right fit for me. And
Mm.
I walked over to the business school, signed up for business classes, and ended up going into marketing. And frankly, that was the best thing I ever did for my music career. Is I learned about marketing, and still did music because I loved it. And I think that moment made me not care what other people thought and whatever the people told me I could or couldn't do. And I just did it for me, for fun. And luckily some people have liked it, more than just my mom and a couple people in their basement that listen to my music, right?
Well, you have several million streams, so you've certainly found your tribe, your people that are listening to you. What do you think about creating a vision of success that's for you? Because obviously, I think when you tell people I want to do music, they're like, well, only a few people get to be Beyonce, but that's not what everybody wants to be fulfilled by. So what
Right.
does that look like for you a little bit with your...
There's never been a better time to be a musician, frankly. If you can build a fan list, I think of about 1,000 people, you can that are like true fans, you can earn a living as a musician. And then there's never been a better time to do it. I think back, rewind the clock 10, 20 years back, and you felt like, oh, I have to have this record label or music label to help me. And the tools are all there. And frankly, a lot of the music labels don't know what they're doing now and are trying to figure it out just like we are, because everything's moving so fast with software and the internet. And independent artists really control their destiny. And, whether you want to do social media stuff or you want to build an email list, you can stream stuff online. There's endless possibilities and ways to monetize music. In my situation, I've liked sharing sheet music, and so I doubled down on building what you'd call kind of a landing page or a funnel, and done books. And literally, we've sold hundreds of thousands of books for several $1 million. Sheet music, and a lot of that has been on hymn music, which, okay, can you niche down? Like, it's not just like music; it's like hymn arrangements on the piano of music, and well over $1 million of revenue that have been generated. Have I had to learn how to do the marketing and the Facebook ads and Google ads, and really kind of educate myself? Absolutely. And I think the next key is you only have so much time. So being smart enough to bring in the right people and recognize, okay, I don't know how to do that thing and somebody else does. And so you either pay the person to do that thing for you, or you go and pay money to learn from the best person. And that way you can fast track it. And I think a lot of musicians in general, they go to school or they take music lessons, but then somehow when we graduate, like the attitude of like, I'm done learning hits with a lot of people. And I don't get it, where if you're willing to spend thousands of dollars a year on education when you're in your 20s, why would you stop doing that when you're in your 30s if you're just starting to get really good at your craft? Like, go learn from the best people. Invest in yourself to surround yourself with other people doing what you want to do, and it's gonna rub off on you. If you're motivated and wanting to put in the time to learn how to do a thing.
So one of the things that we were talking about before we hit record is that you have these different areas. You mentioned you've been in banking, you've been banking marketing, sorry. And, you're wearing this t-shirt, which tells us you also have a travel agency. So you have different areas, and you talked about, I have to be able to hand off to people. So I guess maybe when did you start doing that, and how did you learn to get comfortable with saying, I'm going to let this go?
Well, like if I go early in my career, I was just a small little marketing guy working with a whole bunch of people at a bank, these stuffy bankers in suits trying to do loans. I had no idea how to do loans, but I was a piece of that. And so as you do marketing, there's so many different directions you can go. I think it forced me to kind of realize I can't do everything. And especially as fast as everything has progressed, you just can't be an expert at everything. You should learn a lot about things, but musicians are terrible at letting things go. And so even if it's just hiring somebody to help you for 2 hours a day, or 2 hours a week, even, investing $10 or $20, I think those types of things are, um, you just have to say, okay, can I get an hour of my time back if I pay this person to do the thing? And if you'll do those types of things, you just, you've got to train the person to do it well enough that you're okay with that, and then you'll get better and better, and it just frees up so much time for you. Yeah. That's the number one lesson. If somebody wants to level up and scale up, you have to surround yourself with talented people in a team. For the music side, think about your recording studio. You don't go into this. Most people don't go to the recording studio and be the audio engineer, and they're not the one playing the cello or the piano or singing.
Right.
Like, there's a whole team of people. It won't be great if you try to do it all yourself, unless you're one of those unicorn type artists that somehow does most everything. But the faster you can realize that, and then be willing to let somebody do it well enough, and then give them the flexibility to actually do their thing and do an amazing job, great things will happen when you let somebody spread their wings and just trust them to do it, and just be okay with it not being exactly how you would do it. Then trust that it'll probably be as good or better.
Jason, we had, you released 2 books on the stories behind hymns. So I know that's something, I think you have the second volume just came out. What else is coming up for you in the next year?
I think we've done about a dozen storybooks as well, on e-commerce, with a friend of mine I kind of call him like the inspirational Christian Paul Harvey friend. He's just such a good storyteller, and I've enjoyed helping him. But we've got, on the story side, we've got a patriotic stories that we've been working on he's been working on it for almost 5 years. That's one of those things that it's going to be completely not political at all. It's just one of those things, telling great stories from the past, and kind of hopefully getting people back to the roots of what freedom was all about, no matter what side of the aisle and somebody falls on. It's just, I feel like that's something that's very, very much needed, that to hopefully bring people together and realize, look, we're all friends. We all have pretty much the same goals here. From a music standpoint, I've actually got 3 albums that are in the works. One is about ready to hit record. We've recorded it, modified the MIDI on the piano, and we just need to get the piano tuned, and I'm going to have a whole new album ready to release called Healing Piano, that will be really, really fun. So I'm hopeful that one's some of my best stuff I think I've ever done. It's going to be really exciting to see that come and be shared out there.
Well, I'm excited to listen to that. Thank you, Jason, so much for being on. It's been fun to pick your brain a little bit, and just also get to hear more about that album that I have loved for a while. So everyone, please go ahead and check out Jason's website. We'll have that linked, and we look forward to seeing you next time on the Crossover Deep Dive.